I leaned in at the gala just to hug my son in front of his colleagues. He stepped back like I'd reached for him with a knife instead of open arms. "I'd rather hug a dog than hug you," he said loud enough to catch the table's attention. Laughter followed. Crisp, expensive laughter, the kind that tastes like champagne and mockery. One man actually clapped. Another woman covered her mouth but didn't stop smiling. I didn't flinch. I smiled too, though mine was the kind you hold with your teeth. Dorian turned away like I was a cocktail napkin he was done with. My hand still hovered midair, waiting. No one helped lower it. I straightened my jacket, the one I had tailored for this event, because my son said I should at least look the part if I was going to be seen. Apparently, I'd failed. From across the ballroom, I watched him bask in the spotlight of his own legend. Self-made, someone whispered behind me. Built Mercer and Rowe from scratch. I sipped my drink and let the lie pass. 63 days. That's what was left on the clock. The moment Dorian turned his back on me in front of all those people, I stopped being his mother and started being something else entirely. He had no idea what he'd just triggered. They say betrayal feels like a blade. But to me, it felt more like dust settling so slowly you almost miss how thick it's gotten until you can't breathe. And I had been holding my breath for too many years. I left early without a goodbye. Stepped into the car I'd booked myself because Dorian said he'd already arranged the car for someone else. Fine. Let him believe I came here to be part of his success. Let him believe he had won. The real work started tomorrow. 10 years ago, I signed over my shares in Mercer and Rowe to keep the peace. That was the phrase Dorian used. We were sitting across from each other in a conference room I had paid to renovate at a table I had chosen in a building I had helped him finance. "It's just simpler this way," he'd said, offering a pen with my name engraved on it. "You'll always be honored in spirit." Honored in spirit. As long as I didn't attend board meetings. As long as I stopped speaking to investors. As long as I let him take full credit for everything I'd helped build. I signed, not because I trusted him, but because I loved him, and I was tired. My husband had passed 6 months before. I was still handling the estate, the grief, the silence that hung in our house like wet cloth. Fighting with my son over ownership felt like adding one more weight I wasn't ready to carry. So I gave in, and my name began to disappear. First from the firm's website, then from the hallway portraits. Even the stationery changed. Mercer and Rowe became Mr. Sleek, minimal. But I never signed away the legal foundation. Dorian didn't bother revising the original charter, probably thought no one would ever read it again. But I had a copy. And I knew what it said. I also knew the properties listed under Horizon Subsidiary 3 still bore my signature. They were mine, held quietly in a trust Dorian had no access to, and registered with my tax ID. He'd forgotten that part. Over the years, he'd turned my silence into absence, my absence into irrelevance. But irrelevance doesn't hold up in court. And now, after the gala, I felt that old rhythm return. The tick of strategy. The hum of numbers aligning. The next morning, I called Felicia Grant. She picked up on the second ring. Felicia's voice was brisk over the speaker, the kind of voice that had made her professors tell her to slow down when she was 22. "Bring everything you have," she said. "Every deed, every signature, every amendment." I brought boxes. We sat in her office, wood panels, no nonsense, and spread documents across the table like a forensic map. Felicia flipped through pages with both reverence and impatience. She'd been my student, then my mentee. Now she wore the armor of someone who had seen too many suits try to hide bad behavior behind legalese. It was comforting in a way I hadn't expected. Comfort from competence is its own kind of kindness. "We'll start with the charter," she said. "If your signature is on the original Articles of Incorporation, you retain several powers that are not extinguished by later amendments, unless you explicitly renounce them." She tapped a clause with a pen. They didn't refile this properly. Whoever handled their corporate law was sloppy or overconfident. I watched her parse the language with the same care I used to read financial statements. There was a rhythm to it, clause, comma, signature, margin note. Numbers and legal phrasing that most people find dry were the levers I had learned to pull for decades. Felicia found the language that mattered: the call for an independent audit, the thresholds for fiduciary breach, the narrow but usable language that allowed a founding shareholder to petition for a review. "That's our opening," she said, handing me a highlighted copy. "File for an audit. If the auditors find misappropriation or related party transactions, we can seek immediate injunctive relief. We can freeze accounts and request a forensic review." It felt strange, this combination of procedural calm and impending motion. I was used to the steadiness of ledgers, not court filings. But the logic was the same: gather evidence, document. Irregularities make the numbers speak for themselves. Dorian's world was built on appearances. The audit would expose the scaffolding. Felicia drafted the petition that afternoon, precise and unromantic. When she slid the signed cover sheet across to me, it felt heavier than any of the jewels Dorian kept on his cufflinks. We filed. A week later, Dorian left on what he called a working retreat. The audit began the same week Dorian left for Aspen. He called it a strategic retreat. I'd heard the term before: code for skiing in luxury and drinking brandy beside a fire someone else built. The firm posted a photo of him on social media that week, arms outstretched on a private balcony, captioned, "Vision thrives at altitude." He didn't ask where I was. He hadn't asked me anything in years. But I was in the firm's archive room, where dust-covered truth and convenience wore labels. The audit team, neutral, professional, meticulous, sifted through years of reports. They flagged anomalies in silence, speaking only when necessary, like surgeons mid-operation. The first flag was a series of overlapping vendor payments. Same amounts, similar invoice numbers sent to different entities that shared a single tax ID. Then came the consulting fees, tens of thousands paid monthly to a shell company named Luthien Strategies. No employees, no physical address, just a P.O. box in Montana and an account that led nowhere traceable. "He's been rerouting investor capital," one auditor said, almost to himself, "possibly even using loan collateral as personal float." Felicia took notes with the kind of detachment that feels almost cruel. But it wasn't cruelty. It was focus. When you've seen enough men hide behind the confidence of wealth, you stop being surprised. You start collecting facts. Every discovery was documented, copies notarized, timestamps secured. We didn't speculate. We reported. We didn't accuse. We recorded. I didn't flinch when we found transactions that aligned with the dates of our last family vacations. The ones Dorian never invited me to, claiming space was limited. By the end of the second week, the file was 3 inches thick and weighted with intent. I sat with it one evening at my dining room table, reading through each entry like a ledger of disregard. There were no explosive betrayals, no single smoking gun, just 1,000 small dishonesties piled into something undeniable. Felicia called me on a Thursday. "We're ready," she said. "Now we send it upstairs." And I knew exactly where I'd stand when he came back down. 2 months later, I returned to the firm during their annual fundraising gala. Same ballroom, same chandelier flickering as if it remembered me. Same faces too polished and pleased with themselves, orbiting around money and legacy as if either were permanent. No one asked why I was there. They glanced, they nodded, they smiled with that polite tightness people reserve for someone they think they forgot to thank years ago. I wasn't on the guest list, but I was on the deed. Dorian was near the bar holding quart glass in hand, face animated in that way he reserved for wealthy strangers. His laugh cut across the room, sharp and hollow. I didn't announce myself. I simply walked in and waited until he turned and saw me. He went pale. The color drained fast like ink fading from old fabric. "Mother," he said, teeth barely moving. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I moved past him. There was a microphone at the podium floral arrangement just slightly off-center. I adjusted it. The room didn't go silent all at once. It slowed in pockets. Whispers first, then turned heads, then stillness. It took them longer to recognize me than I expected. Maybe it had been too long. Or maybe they'd never really seen me in the first place. I tapped the mic just once. "I'd like to share a few updates on behalf of the founding partners," I said. There was a flicker of confusion. A man near the front looked toward Dorian as if waiting for him to take control. "Mercer and Rowe. I continued as recently undergone a comprehensive audit. In light of the findings, certain actions are being implemented immediately." Felicia entered from the side door, folder in hand. I didn't look at Dorian, but I could hear him move the scrape of his shoes pivoting behind me. His world had always relied on spectacle, expensive noise. But this wasn't noise. This was structure. This was pressure applied at the seam. Felicia handed me the envelope and I began to read. Felicia handed me the envelope, her face unreadable. I took it with both hands, careful not to let them shake. The paper was thick, the weight of process and precision. I opened it slowly, not for effect, but because I wanted the moment to land exactly where it belonged. I cleared my throat. Let the silence settle fully. No music played. Even the waitstaff froze. Effective immediately, I read Dorian Mercer is suspended pending investigation under Section 7(3) of the Founding Agreement and Audit Compliance Protocol. A pause. The words didn't echo, but they stayed. Someone near the front whispered, "Is this a joke?" Security didn't wait for confirmation. They had already been briefed, contracted privately through a third-party firm, one that didn't report to Dorian. They moved in with the calm certainty of men who had done this before. He didn't fight. He just stood there, holding a half-full flute of champagne, blinking like the lights had changed too fast. His face went blank, the way guilty men go blank, like pulling curtains closed in a burning room. As they guided him toward the exit, he looked over his shoulder. Our eyes met briefly. He didn't speak. Neither did I. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been signed, sealed, and filed with the right clerk. I returned the envelope to Felicia, who stepped forward and handed out a limited statement to the press. She didn't answer questions. She didn't need to. The paperwork spoke louder than any prepared quote. The crowd didn't scatter, but they didn't mingle either. No one approached me. I watched them move in small, confused clusters, adjusting their understanding of who I was. Later, I walked the halls of the office I once called mine. It still smelled the same air-filtered, neutral antiseptic success, but the silence felt honest now. Behind the door marked partner. I sat at the desk Dorian had once claimed as his throne. He had removed my framed diploma years ago. I found it in the closet behind unused branded tote bags. I hung it back up, leveled it carefully, and turned off the light. That night, I received 11 messages. They came in bursts, first angry, then pleading, then quiet. I didn't delete them. I let them sit there, stacked like evidence. The first was from Dorian's assistant. He's saying, "This is a misunderstanding. Can you please call?" The next was from a board member, a man who once toasted me at a holiday dinner and then forgot my name 6 months later. "You've made a mistake, Viola. He'll fix it privately. Just retract the audit." Then came Dorian. Voice low, steady. Controlled rage barely disguised as civility. "You think this will make you important again? You just destroyed your own legacy." I didn't respond. By midnight, the tone shifted. "Mom, please, you don't understand. Then you've ruined everything. And finally, I hope you're proud of what you did." I turned off my phone and sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once taught him to balance a checkbook. The same table where he'd asked for seed money to start the firm. My reflection stared back from the glass surface, older, sharper, quieter. In the morning, Felicia met me at the courthouse. She moved through the hallways with quiet authority heels striking in perfect rhythm. We signed the injunctions before lunch. By noon, the firm's accounts were frozen. Vendors stopped payments. Payroll suspended. The first ripple of panic began to spread across departments. Felicia's voice was calm. "They'll call this a hostile move. Let them." She handed me a copy of the filing stamped and sealed. Everything's by the book. When I stepped outside, the city was loud in all the usual ways, sirens, traffic, a busker singing off-key, but beneath it there was a strange stillness. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a single text. From Dorian. "You've made your point. Now fix it." I put the phone face down and let it ring again. It was going to ring for a long time. By the end of the week, silence would cost him more than money. He forgot I was the one who set up the original licensing deal, the one that let Mercer and Rowe expand beyond state lines when no investor would take the risk. I handled the contracts myself, drove 3 hours to a meeting. He overslept through and signed the deal that launched his first office. He was 26, then full of ambition and rehearsed gratitude. "You're the best partner I could ever have," he'd said that night. I believed him. He forgot the trust in my name still controlled the waterfront leases. Those parcels were small when we bought them run-down warehouses along the lake, but I knew how to read zoning maps. In a decade, the area became prime real estate. He bragged about owning the view. He didn't own a thing. The trust was irrevocable, the documents airtight, and the signatures were mine alone. He forgot I kept every record he ever tried to destroy. The old receipts, drafts, early tax filings. When he told an accountant to clean the archive, I boxed everything myself. Every spreadsheet, every scanned invoice, every ledger he dismissed as outdated. He never realized I'd catalog them again under new storage IDs stored off-site in a bank that never handled his accounts. And he forgot my friends. Not the social kind, the professional ones. The quiet ones who never took sides in family drama, but remembered who had paid their retainers decades ago. Attorneys, auditors, and regulators who owed me small favors. Favors I never used until now. By the time Dorian's attorneys called to threaten a counterclaim, the trust had already transferred the leases into a non-profit holding company. They couldn't touch it. Every move he made bounced against the walls he didn't know I'd built for myself. He thought I was sentimental. I was just prepared. The next morning, I walked into the firm's lobby for the first time in years. The receptionist looked up, startled. My name was still engraved on the founding plaque. I traced the letters, once then kept walking. Dorian was already waiting in the boardroom. By the time the press caught wind of it, Dorian had already sold 3 of his cars, closed 2 of his credit cards, and moved in with a former college friend who owed him too many favors to say no. He told the papers it was temporary. A strategic pause, he called it. A pause from what he didn't say. The headlines were polite at first. Leadership dispute at Mercer and Rowe founder, suspended amid financial review. But the word hostile crept in within a week. Hostile shareholder action, power struggle, family feud over control. Let them print whatever story made it easier to digest. The truth wouldn't sell papers. This wasn't about a boardroom. It never was. This was about every time he called me, only when he needed a signature. Every holiday invitation sent too late to matter. Every business card that bore only his name, though mine, built the foundation. It was about the hug he withheld that night at the gala and the laugh that followed. He called again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. I wasn't interested in apologies that only surfaced under pressure. The kind of regret that comes after money leaves isn't regret at all. It's fear. In the boardroom, the interim directors finalized the restructuring. Felicia stood at the head of the table, walking them through the new compliance protocols. I didn't speak unless spoken to, but every eye landed on me when numbers were questioned. That part hadn't changed when the numbers mattered. I was still the one they trusted. Afterward, I passed by his old office. The door was cracked open. Inside, the walls were bare. The desk had been cleared. Only the faint imprint of where his nameplate used to sit remained, two slightly discolored rectangles on the wood. He'd left everything he couldn't sell behind. I closed the door gently. Tomorrow, the name on the front of the building would be changed back to what it always should have been. I took the elevator to the top floor alone. The ride was smooth, silent. No music. No mirrored glances from colleagues pretending not to recognize me. Just the soft hum of machinery doing what it was built to do. When the doors opened, everything looked almost unchanged. Same lighting, same marble tile, same reception desk, shaped like a question someone forgot to finish. But the energy was different now, still reverent. Like the building itself knew something had shifted. The founding plaque still hung beside the entrance to the executive wing. They'd never taken my name off because they'd never legally been able to. They had simply pretended I wasn't there, hoping no one would notice the space I filled. The receptionist looked up as I approached her, expression unsure. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm here to reclaim my desk." She didn't argue. She didn't ask for ID. She just nodded once and stood as if the room had quietly agreed with me. The office had been aired out, the dust of rushed departure cleared. I stepped inside and sat down in the chair Dorian had imported from Milan, the one he liked to mention in interviews. It was ergonomic, but impersonal. Too cold, too curated. I adjusted the height, pulled the keyboard closer, and opened a fresh notepad. Outside the glass walls, the skyline stretched wide and indifferent. It had watched this firm rise and wobble just like I had. But now it would see it steady itself again. I didn't start with anything dramatic. I reviewed vendor lists, cross-checked payroll, flagged a few overdue invoices. Quiet work. Necessary work. The kind that doesn't end up in headlines, but holds everything together. At noon, I declined the welcome lunch the team tried to organize. I didn't need a celebration. I needed consistency. By 3, I had already set 3 new policy standards. By 5, the office was nearly empty again. I stayed an hour longer, finishing one last set of notes. Then I turned off the monitor, locked the door, and walked to the elevator without a sound.